Welcome to Asian Like Me, presented by me, Dr. Sohee Jun, the podcast for the modern Asian woman redefining what it means to thrive. I've spent years navigating the complexities of culture, family expectations, and career ambitions. Here, we have real, unfiltered conversations with incredible women who are breaking barriers, charting their own paths, and owning their power. Together, we'll dive into the wins, the lessons, and the challenges we all face. And yeah, we'll laugh. We'll share stories and drop some actionable tips to help you crush it in your own way. This is your space to feel seen, heard, and inspired. Ready to rewrite the rules? Let's drop in. Hi, Zeena.
Hi.
I've been so looking forward to this conversation with you because I want our listeners to know all about you and all about this amazing nonprofit that I think is so necessary. And so we're going to dive in. And let me start with the first question I ask everyone that joins me in conversation. And that is, what's currently lighting you up?
I'm a Scorpio, so I feel like everything's always lighting me up. So today, actually, and I'm not sure of the timeliness of this, but I actually just spoke at a company event for my day job. And it was really interesting seeing how many different Asian American people that I knew were there, different Asian American creatives. And there was a younger, like, college crowd there too, as well. But surveying the room, getting an understanding of what was going on, I was like, wow, our community has done so much for so many people over the last 5 years. And I had a moment where I realized also what I have done for other people, not even in the Asian American community, but just my peers. I really had a moment of reflection, actually. And what was lighting me up was, even though it is a very dark and boring time, unfortunately, for a lot of people here in the US, and I do think that there is a lot of strength in silence in a weird way, and strength in just like showing up and showing your support. So what's lighting me up is personally reminding myself that's a reality, and to continue that work and to continue doing what I'm doing because it's still very necessary and important. And it's not an optics game, it's actually for other people. So feeling really positive about it in this conversation.
Oh, I love it. We all need that. It sounded like it was such a powerful reminder for you. And sometimes that gets lost, right? Especially in the work that you do and it being a nonprofit and it being the Asian American Collective. And we're going to dive into that. I do have a question around that, though, about all of the reminders of the work that collectively you felt people were doing this morning. For me, I just feel like sometimes it's never enough, right? This is another reason why I started the podcast about sharing the stories of the ways that we're rewriting narrative and doing badass work. And there is so much being done, and yet it feels like we don't hear enough of it. Is that just me?
No, it's not just you. And I think sometimes when you do hear about it, it's actually not legitimate or work that isn't self-driven or self-motivated. Like, I think sometimes those with the loudest bark aren't necessarily doing the real work. Like, I don't want to play people out because everybody has their different method, but I'm too busy doing the work half the time. And it's funny because a lot of my 20s were actually spent being media personality and being very vocal in my career. These were nascent days of social media and what we now know as the leaderboard of our life. I was very conscious of doing and then displaying, doing, displaying, or displaying, then doing, right? There was a real conscious flow. And I think many of us who both knew what it was like to live without the internet and social media were overwhelmed by it, but it was really exciting at that time because you were able to gain and capture a global and worldwide audience and mobilize people in a way that you couldn't before. And I don't want to negate the power of that actually, because I think a lot of people are like, it's just social media. Wow. But I think you got to be very careful about social media in general and what you believe and how you frame it out. I do think that when you're doing the work, you hear at least from people. There's people who are doing much more than myself, by the way, who I very often am just completely enamored by because they don't have a following. You're never going to hear what they're doing.
Yeah.
But if they didn't exist and their work didn't exist, things would not be moving forward. I struggle with that because it's always going to be the loudest that are heard, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the most effective or the most legitimate either. And I sometimes feel, now I'm just being shady, A lot of times the people who are barking the loudest are doing it for optics reasons and for self-fulfillment and not for the actual people that they're trying to serve.
Oh, mic drop on that one. I felt that in my soul. Because for me, sometimes I'm like, am I making a difference? And because I'm not the loudest about it, to your point, and I think that there is this real swell of people doing great, meaningful work that's leaving an imprint that isn't about loud and isn't also that are tied to our culture as Asian Americans that we're not loud enough, that way of being okay in the US, where it is so much about being loud. So let me just dive into your Filipina heritage. And when you talk about doing a lot, boy, you have had such a storied career, right? You are a badass executive, a creative. You podcast and have had so many out there. And by the way, I have millions of questions for you on that. You're a co-founder of the Asian American Collective, and it was started in 2020, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. We just hit our 5 year very silently, actually.
Let's talk about silence.
Yeah, intentionally because I'm working on a bigger idea that will really help tie some of this together. And I really do want to make that a vocal moment. Yeah, I've done a lot in my career. Whenever I sit back and look at it, I'm 41 years old, and I feel sometimes feel like a kid.
I love that.
Very young soul, yeah. And I always joke with a lot of the guys that used to work on my team. We live around, we're all from New Jersey, right? They're like, "Oh, you're old now. We're messing with you because you're old." I was like, "You guys are getting older too. Kids anymore either." But we always joke about it because I'm like, even though I am older and on paper, I guess I'm a mature woman, I do feel that I have a very youthful soul. I love being connected to younger professionals and younger people. I love hearing about their ambitions, their lives, their struggles. I think there's a lot of times, like as you get older, there's this misconception of Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and their perspective and how do they consume. And especially being a marketer, I've had to ask that question and dissect that question in a lot of different ways from a performance perspective, from a brand perspective.
Yeah.
That's what you do, right? And that's fair. But I just love learning about what people's ambitions and goals are in their younger years now. I feel I have a wealth of knowledge to pass on to them. So just try to keep it real, keep it a buck at all time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really proud of my experiences. I will say, like on paper, maybe it looks impressive, but there's been a lot of tears along the way. It has not been all amazing in my life. And I am very quick to own up to my failures and own up to times that just weren't as sexy as possible. Right. And I think that we're living in such a, like almost toxic positivity time.
Agree.
Maybe not, but the last 2 years, it's been like, let's look at the leaderboard. Let's take a look at. And I really identify with Gen Z and their ability to display their ups and downs because that's life.
It is life. And I love that.
Reality.
Yeah. And thank you for pointing that out, that it's not always rainbows and it's not always the outcome that people focus on. We get so fixated, I think, on the outcome and or, what's on the resume that there are moments of doubt, there are moments of tears, and sure, happiness and celebration too in that journey. And that's what I'm hearing you say is like, you have an impressive accolades. No one would, I think, doubt. And it's hard won. And I say that a lot. And oh, by the way, Zeena, I always make this point about what you said about the toxic positivity, which I do think we were swinging that far. And I do see it coming a little bit back into balance where
Sure.
let's talk about the reality of things and how me personally, I get down and how do I pick myself up. The reframing for me is not about ignoring the challenges. It's just feeling through the challenges and then how do we pick ourselves back up?
1,000%. I can actually identify I went through a pretty rough situation. And after I had my child, something that was very like life shattering for me. I remember feeling this moment of if you look at my Instagram, if you look at my LinkedIn, and you look at the articles written about me, articles I've written for national publications, you on paper are like, wow, she's done all these things. And then I had a real moment of failure, like a true moment of, wow, I have failed in this one particular situation and something happened to me. And it was a moment where I had to also remember that you are not your accolades. And by the way, like, you're going to learn the most about who you are from those rough moments. And I know it's very cliche to say that. And I know at the moment you're like, okay, I was like joking with my husband of like, you know what? I was like, let God take the reins here
Yeah.
because I was just so in despair. But I think sometimes you need those moments, right? Because life can be pretty boring if it's just positive and all rainbows and arts and things. You have to feel human at times. And even though I'm on the other side of that currently, like I hadn't had a moment like that in a very long time.
Yeah.
And it was for me to really check in on what do I believe? Who have I become? And what do I want to do moving forward?
Those are deep questions that we don't often get to ask, which is what matters to me. And what I'm hearing you say is it gets to the values. And don't you think that there is this weird kind of juxtaposition that it's not as sweet unless we have felt the pain?
Definitely. I just think that when the pain comes, nobody wants
Now, we push up against it. We're like,
wants a divorce. Nobody wants something. Like, I do think, yes, absolutely. I agree. Listen, I started as a songwriter, right? And all of my songs were written about painful moments. And I realized through a lot of therapy and a lot of years of destructive behavior in my personal life, mostly, you don't need to go that far. You don't need to like be cry like tears in the shower. I'm from New York and New Jersey, and there was always a joke when we were younger because we were always chasing after boys that weren't just good enough for us. And me and my girlfriends used to always say, "Hey, like nobody sees your tears in the subway or your tears in the shower," and it's so true. That's just like it's like you cry in your corner, you dust yourself off, and you move it along. But to your point, the resilience factor and that level of grit is really how you survive and how you become better. And a lot of kids actually, kids, I say kids, but like younger folks, ask me, what's one piece of advice that I'm like, be gritty and realize that nothing is given to you. You are not deserved of anything, actually. And I think that's probably a big difference between millennials and Gen Z. Yeah. But I think once you can rectify that you're not deserved of anything, it will also alleviate and lift some of the pressure of feeling like you're missing out on what you deserve. Because when you look at it on the flip side, you realize that hard work may be in vain at times, but then it's going to pay off eventually in some way, shape, or form. And that's one thing I really try to reiterate and really try to get across the line, especially some of the younger people that I mentor, because the grittiness is real and it's going to continue throughout your life, right? Like it's not about how many times you fail, it's how many times you get up. Right? So I really do think that just having the grittiness and having that is like one of my strongest qualities. And sometimes I'm down for longer than others.
well, same here. I could see that, Zeena, in you. You have such a spirit that is both bold and transparent, which makes you very relatable. And I know mentoring is such a big part of the AC. I have so many questions. It was started in the pandemic. And before that, I need you to define like what it means for you to be gritty. Like what does gritty in action look like for you?
So we catch this right before the pandemic, which is wild.
Oh,
Our first event was at CAA in LA during the Grammys, February 2020, right? So we were
yeah.
so kicking it off strong. We had a huge event. One of my partners was actually working there at the time. And they were gracious enough to like host and sponsor a party for us. It was incredible. And we looked around and we're like, okay, we thought we maybe have a few people there. It was like over hundreds of people. We're like,
Oh,
wait,
wow.
what?
Wow.
And started on Snow Patients. It literally was, I went to Soho House, met with a woman I had loosely known who was also Asian in the music industry. But another Asian friend of mine was like, hey, she's trying to start something similar to what you've been talking about. Because it had been on my mind for years. And I had been like trying to gather a little cohort of coworkers. Hey, would you be down for this? Would you be interested in this? And really do some temperature engaging there. And then when I met Grace Lee, my partner, it was on, right? Because her and I had a similar let's get it done energy. And between her, I, and then my other partner, Caroline, who is a really high regarded hip hop agent, been in the business for 20 plus years, and there was nothing that we couldn't do together. So we're like, all right, let's just see who's out there. Let's see what we can get done. Yeah. And we were like, let's start these events where people can meet each other, just dope Asians from across the board in different creative concentrations. And let's see what happens. And then we launched our first two events right before the pandemic, and there were tons of people there.
Wow.
In doing that, I realized that there was a real need for an inner life community. And then the pandemic hit. And I ended up moving to Denver for a career opportunity. And it was good because in that isolation, I was able to really brainstorm, incubate, try, and test and learn what this could be. And then we launched our first mentorship cohort. It was incredible. And virtually everybody had time to do something during the
That's
pandemic,
right.
right? So we got some really great folks on. and started to build our social presence, which happens to be like my sweet spot because that's what I do for a living and digital brand building. So that was really fun. And then we started to see all of these different crimes that were happening towards Asians. There was a lot of anti-Asian rhetoric, as we know, from the Heinz power, which have not slowed down anti-everything at this point. It was interesting because I felt so incensed. I felt so empowered to take a stance and to really raise mainstream visibility for it. So one of the things that we did is launch a change.org petition to raise awareness with mainstream media outlets. And it really took off in a way that we really did. Like we wanted to do good things, but we did not expect it to take off in that fashion. Yeah. Friends with a lot of artists and a lot of people in Hollywood. I think that was really helpful because they wanted to help as well. Yeah. And saw how it really felt high degree of allyship there. We were very inspired by a lot of the things that we saw happening in the Black community, with just the stance that they were taking on equity and making sure that we were really addressing some pretty serious things that like had not publicly been talked about. And it was our time. So we were really excited to join the conversation, help push it forward. And then it just helped to empower and fuel, like fan the flames for what we were doing on the mentorship side, moved into educating through editorial and really helping to expand that. And then a lot of just community events, which started virtually, but then we went back and started real. Yeah, virtual. And then we went back to IRL in New York and LA, and we've been doing it ever since and really staying true to that programming. I think as a nonprofit organization too, it's interesting. There's a lot of ebb and flow. We work very bootstrapping. Yeah, lean and means. I've been on the board of other organizations that are very contingent on money. We are not contingent on money. We are literally volunteers. And when the money comes in, it's very helpful for us to not put that cost onto our community and really provide events and different spaces where we can do things. But a big aim of ours is also to give back. I was just talking with a girlfriend yesterday about gathering a bunch of just donated products and things that we could sell at one of the markets that she does to donate that to some of the fire victims in California. So, we're trying to just elevate and help the community. And that's what we set out to do. And that's what we're going to continue to do as long as we exist. Yeah. And honestly, when you ask about grit, right? Yeah. Grit is really showing up when shit's hard. And, I love that definition. It is totally showing up when shit's hard, when it's not fun, when you're putting in that extra effort. It's the same thing as like, why do you go to the gym? You don't go to the gym because you're like dying. Oh my God, I'm so excited to go to the gym this morning. It's because you're really longing for that result after. Yeah. That result after is what I think people are not as attuned to these days, right? Yeah. That's why I say the grit is that low, right? Because there's a lot of complaints, a lot of people trying to air out cancel culture, which I think has had well-intentioned at some points, but have had a real negative effect on perception overall. Grit is really just making sure that you're bearing through it and being able to also celebrate some of those good times, but like really show up equally when those times are not as great. Oh man. I wish you could put that on a t-shirt. Like you need to put that on the HDA shop. We will not be selling merch again, though. Was that a learning? Yeah, I mean, talk about grit. We all had this amazing idea, like we're going to sell merch, and our creative director Mia is just incredible. And she was like, you know what? Let's take this on as a challenge, right? Like she works a full-time job, I work a full-time job, and her and I really vibe creatively, and we both had no clue what we were doing, but we're like, okay, let's do it. I really was adamant about making it very full circle. So Asian vendor, Asian designer. Oh, wow. Making sure that was really checks and balances. At the time, I was working in fashion. So I was very attuned to just how important those things were. Retail fashion, too. So totally foreign. Like I don't make t-shirts myself. I'm just like marketing them. Yeah. But yeah, it was a learning. That's a bit more effort and less return than you I did it, and we have a ton of dope Asian sweatshirts because of it. So go on to the AAC store, AsianAmericanCollective.org, and definitely buy them because we need to get them out of Carolina. Well, I will buy one, and I also want one to give to others. So for our listeners, we're trying to get learning development thing happening here between Zeena and I and AC. So we'll see. And I want the merch. I want to give it to people. Yeah. Okay. So what I heard, there were so many great nuggets in there, but go back for me because you said you had sensed a need for this. So what was that sensing? What were you seeing in the zeitgeist that you were like, you know what, this C needs to be birthed? So at the time I was working at Atlantic Records and I was working with a really incredible Black women who were just so impressive to me. And I love working in music because of that. It's a very naturally diverse environment because the artists are naturally diverse. So it's one of the few environments that I've worked in where you see women of color in power, which I really respect and love about it. And some of the Black women I was working with were like part of HBCUs and sororities and had a strong network or had gone through different like collective agencies that they have all like coalesced as really great working relationships that are also like centered on creativity and expanding their reach. So that was one of the inspiring points for me. And I am half Filipino, not full Filipino, but nobody ever, oh, she's white. They're funny, not clearly very Spanish. I'm like, no, we're Spasian. Boom.
Is that a word? Spatial?
It is for me. I love it. Yeah, it is for me. I just felt the sense, I've always felt the sense of leadership and community and really standing up for what's right and bringing people together. I am like a mega dot connector. One of my girlfriends is always, we're a mega connector. If somebody needs to know somebody, you will figure it out or the right person to connect them with.
Yeah.
And I pride myself on that because I think that's something that everybody should be doing if they can. But people like, we're floating out here alone. We definitely need to help each other and really help make it a better environment for everybody and take that responsibility seriously. I think a lot of times, especially the parent now, give people a lot of grace too because I have time when I have time. I don't always have time, and I have time when I have time. And sometimes I'm going to be really annoying, and you're not going to hear from me for a week and a half. And then I'm going to blitz you out of nowhere because I'm like, oh my God, I finally got to my personal email.
Oh,
But you work a full-time job where I manage people and I have things that are immediate needs.
yeah.
A billion things and get done. So I'm constantly juggling those things. And yeah, really, it was just really off of that. Like I really wanted to help people and was really feeling a sense of wanting to build something on my own, but knowing that I needed partners to help me because you cannot do anything real.
Yeah.
You really can't.
There was a time. There was a time, honestly, Zeena, where I thought, you know what, I could just, to your point, you were going to say that you can do it fast. And now for me, it's looking at, okay, do I want to do it fast or do I want to go wide and make a bigger impact and slower and more collaboratively? I'm really turning the tides on that. So I love that you're sharing that.
See, I just think it's really important for you to work with partners. Like it can be a little bit harder for sure. And there's more cooks in the kitchen, but what we've been able to do is just so much more expansive and like the collective ownership of everybody over it is really beautiful. And we just have so many great volunteers who I've watched kind of blossom and grow over the last few years. And it's really encouraging to see like where they can go. Oh, and I just really love that about it. So yeah, it was a personal mission where I found like-minded individuals that have the same personal mission. And what keeps me here is just, again, like my cup was filled because seeing how many people have been affected by us or just like really learn or gain something from us. For some people, giving back isn't an option or they don't really think about it actively. I really think about it very actively.
I can see that. Yeah.
Moment thing too, to it for me too.
Yeah, of course. It's one of those things where it's like it fulfills you and fills your soul and it gives to so many. I'm curious about the mentoring because I've spent so many years in corporate and part of that was helping some companies or managers create mentoring programs. What's been a success story that you've seen in the mentoring that C does?
Oh my God, there's been many. I love it. There's two things to segregate, right? There's mentorship and then there's sponsorship. And I think mentorship is really helping somebody kind of work through ideas and workshopping things, like gaining insight on yourself through the experiences of somebody who might have more information for you around whatever. So that's the part of mentorship that I think is really important. And in order for you to see what is possible, you have to see somebody who's already done it, right? It's much easier once a precedent has been set or you're like, okay, I can do that. I could become VP of this company. I can do whatever, right? Like possible. And sometimes you need, like, God bless therapists. You need somebody to look at it from a different lens and a different view in a more arbitrary place than you looking at it from. So I think that's what's really important about mentorship. In some of the cases, like people have gotten hired, people have put onto jobs, people have taken career changes, right? I have a mentee from another program, actually, from Feminine Forward. So, and she's super interesting. I've grown to really understand and see what she's looking for. I've talked through some ideas of like, how do you DIY it? But do you really want that? Is that really what you want?
Yeah.
And talking through different ideas with her. She's also half Filipino. So it's really cool to see a younger version of yourself, like clunking through it and where she's coming in her career. It's always really interesting because I want to give her like advice on getting more money, making sure that she understands what the outcome of the decision she's making and the conversation she's having will really be. So, like, from a mentorship perspective, I think that's extremely important because you don't get a lot of direct access to ask those questions.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is like people forget that just need to ask questions.
I know.
In order to be way more sound of mind and way more intelligent in the way that you're like taking moves, you need to actually make sure that you're asking the right question. I've always been intellectually curious and it's just part of who I am naturally. But I wish somebody had told me that that's just it.
Yeah.
Right? Or that maybe someone told me and I completely ignored because I was a young, pompous jerk. Really, that's it. Like, you got to ask the right questions and lean in with the right people and build and nurture relationships. And that's continued to be a really important part of what I am and what I evangelize to younger folks.
Yeah.
And I actually talked about yesterday was peer-to-peer mentorship. And I am very adamant about this. And I have many peer mentors and people that I go to for direct advice about thing. People I go to that spiritually inspire me. I have one girl friend particularly. We'll go to the beach at 9 a.m. in the morning, drink coffee, and just shoot the shit and talk about like personal life, her life, like things that she says to me sometimes just completely blow me away in a way that I don't think about immediately, but I think about a day or two later. And I'm just so inspired by her perspective.
Yeah.
And that's really important, right? People forget that your peers are going to be with you much longer than somebody you meet who's maybe, at the echelon as the president of the company. Okay, cool, whatever. I get you in a month. But your peers are really the people to go with. So I think that's really important. And one thing I want to double click on is the sponsorship piece. Right? Because ultimately you need people to advocate for you within companies to get where you want to go. And a lot of times people handle this in a very me way. I feel is absolutely a wrong short-term approach that just does not yield the result you need.
Okay, tell me more about this.
Everybody always like, can you get me to the hiring manager? Can you do this? Do I think your work is good? Even if you're part of the work, like for a more junior level role, I'm a little bit less apt to ask those questions because if you're trying to be coordinator, best of luck, whatever. If you make it through the interview process, then maybe you are qualified. But when we get to a higher level, I do think that you have to understand that your work has to speak for itself and you have to be hot in these streets. Like you have to really be known for what you do and you have to advocate for yourself. You have to frame yourself, brand yourself, be able to explain to me why you were a good fit for those things. Like people make it hard to advocate for them. Yeah. Make it as easy as possible to advocate for you. If you're asking me to forge one on a recruiter or hiring manager, write me the note. I'm not writing you. I don't have fucking time to do that. Yeah. Yeah. Who the hell has time to do that at my stage? So those are the things where I'm split away sometimes that people are more conscientious and bought out in the way that they approach things, but you're going to get the result.
And Zeena, you just said so many nuggets. I got to tease it apart.
Go ahead.
First, I love that you differentiated between mentorship and sponsorship. A lot of people get confused or collapse the two or haven't even really thought about those two distinctions. So I think it's really important and great. I've always encouraged people too, similar to what you said about your spiritual friend or the people that you go to for different things, to branch out. Like you need what I call a tribe of advocates or a tribe of mentors. You don't go to one person for everything, just like you don't go to your husband for everything. When I was married, I know, right? Let's flip that. They come to us for everything, but not the other way around. And
you have to be everything. The breadwinner, therapist, the best friend. I'm like... Get a friend that you can talk to about this.
I know. That's a whole nother podcast. We can go have an episode too, but
1,000%.
Right? So it's a matter of different people offer different perspectives that we need to open up our aperture and bring those people in for mutual benefit. The way that they leave an imprint on us in that current situation or days later, like to your point, oh, that really hit with me. We leave an imprint on them too. And I love what you said about opening up how you look at these things, not just for the give me, what can I gain from asking Zeena about introducing me to someone. It's what can you give as well? And I think a lot of people just think I want to gain this. So let me just shoot my shot, which has its place, but not always.
Sure. And I'll always give precedent to that where I'm like, okay, especially if they're young, hey, whatever, they're trying, they've asked me nicely, I will put it forward and see. Again, if I feel like like a more junior thing where everybody needs a foot in the door, right? Exactly. It's really tough when people are asking a lot of you constantly. And that's a little bit of the dark side of being so giving, so dedicated to actually helping the community. It's like I can only do so much because I have to be self-preserving too of my energy and what I bring to my child and how I can do that. In the same rate, like I have learned within the last maybe 5 years, and I think becoming a parent has really helped me with this, to ask for help when I don't have the knowledge or know, right? And I think it's a little bit of ego depth and understanding that like you don't know what you don't know. Really want to ask the people who do know. I'm not gonna play myself out because I've always again been very like intellectually curious in that way where I just want to know everything about everyone. Yeah, same. But great. I'm a creep by one thing. I know, but and I really want the best for everybody who's a good person. Like I really do. But especially this journey of looking for preschools and trying to figure out my child's next steps and what's good, what's bad. You really have to field a lot of information and you have to pick apart pieces of what's good for you and good for your kid and good for your future in a way that I think has been like a little bit humbling for me. Like of just trying to figure out because what kind of parent do I want to be?
Oh my gosh, let's talk. You know what?
A whole other podcast.
Zeena, I have 3 kids. And by the way, you had started so many podcasts, and we'll touch on that because I want to know, as an entrepreneur and a creative, I know I've gone down this journey. It's like you have to pick and choose what you bring about into the world. So that's another topic, but we need to touch on this toddler mom thing and being a parent and with all of the ambitions that you have. And I know I've certainly been at odds with myself and tripping myself up and wanting to do so much. I talk about this so much. I've burnt out like multiple times and I know I will again. It's just, can I do it with less like harshness and less rebound? Tell me about what you choose to do. You have a toddler. It's a whole different stage of life where my kids are entering into high school. I have one in high school, one about to enter. I have a 10-year-old. It's just different. It's different seasons. And I talk about this too. So what takes precedence for you and how do you determine that?
You know, I'm failing at this one. I
Preach, sister.
very humbling. And I think that I've always been a great multitasker, but what is different about having a young child is you want to be present during your time with them. So I go to work 4 days a week out in the world, in the office, and it's really nice to have that separation of life actually, because I think I need it, right? In order to compartmentalize a bit. But I wake up between 5:30 and 6:30 every morning, right? And make sure that those morning hours before my house is awake, I try to leverage that as much as possible, whether that be for my physical well-being. So going to yoga, going to Pilates, weightlifting, whatever, or using that time to tap into my creativity. And one of those things fails every day.
That's
Right?
true.
Like
That is true.
It's either I'm not doing creative stuff or I'm just posting or doing AAC stuff. And that's why sometimes you won't hear from me on email for a week because I'm just like, I haven't had the energy in the morning to wake up. Maybe my kid was up all night and I just was going nuts and I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
So I'm in my failure of quote unquote balancing my time. I realized that I am much more concerted. I am much more thoughtful about what I'm investing my time in. I still cave every now and then and waste my time on something I really should not, but it's a learning, right? And just being judicious is really important and getting more done within the time that I have. I can't say that like I have it down to a science, but I really try to take each day as a new day, rally my energy and figure out where my heart is at that day and really dive in.
Yeah.
You know, create a standpoint when you have it.
Yeah.
In the podcast space, actually, I'm currently working on a new podcast, so I'm excited about that.
I love it. Share.
I'm in an interesting juncture in my life where I had in my 20s to my early 30s, I was sex, drugs, rock and roll, man.
Yeah.
I would like partying in the clubs. I was in a band for 15 years. I was balancing it all out. I was doing CrossFit 5 days a week, 4 days a week, which I cannot believe now.
That's insane.
Where did I find the energy? Like looking back to the time, I'm like, what the hell? Like I was in crazy shape. I've always been an athlete, but it's also a mental thing and a physical thing for me as well, just to be able to to feel in my body and feel strong. And feeling strong has always been really important. And I think about that and I'm like, wow, like the time has passed. I'm a completely different person now. I was very used to being on camera, so I was conscious about my weight. A lot of things that like I just don't think about anymore. And I'm much more introspective. So whenever you can find kind of the time and when you find that creative energy, I think you got to lean in at the time and give yourself a lot more grace. Like you're not. And I think we have a really hard time in this like me, and like, fast culture. We're also seeing like only again people's wins for the most part. It's hard not to think, man, I should be doing more. I should be doing this. I
Oh,
should be doing.
God, that is like a running track in my head.
Yeah, totally. But I'm also a psycho and I always want to be doing more. And I work at a pace that a lot of people cannot work at.
Yeah.
So I try to find that bargain within myself. But yeah, I really do ask, what's my end goal and who do I want to touch with whatever project that I'm doing? And I've done podcasts about interesting women. I've done podcasts about my sex life in my 20s.
Yeah.
And I've done podcasts about politics and the intricacies and the infrastructure of politics. And I don't just mean like politics in terms of our government, politics in terms of all relationships. And when I find something I'm fascinated by, I really want to dive in from a narrative perspective. And I want to keep evolving that. So
Yeah.
that thinking a lot about next steps and a new podcast, but also the documentary world and production and things that have always been fascinating to me that I want to make something big.
Yeah. Yes.
Something big.
I feel that. I just got goosebumps when you said it. Honestly, it's like I see so much of that. I'm insatiably curious. I'm always learning. And honestly, there isn't a day that goes by that I'm like, oh my gosh, that's interesting. And
Totally.
that's what leads to wanting to dive deeper and into more things, which kind of trips me up in terms of my time and energy, given everything that we are. And by the way, I don't believe in balance. I think balance is ridiculous. It's a lie. And I actually speak about this, and my book is about it. It's a lie. And I think as women, when we have this baby that we're given, or we give birth to baby or children, and we are lucky enough to do that, or just to have kids in however ways they come to our lives, with them comes this assumption that we have to balance it all. And it's just such a disservice. And I just want every listener, and Zeena, you're laughing your head off. It's like a lie. And let's just put that down.
It is an absolute lie. And I'll give you one example where I feel like I've had to personally get over it. When I'm 41 and I had my baby, I was 39. And I've always been able to figure out how to lose weight. I've always been like, all right, I'll figure it out, whatever. Yeah, I've had many friends tell me you're 40s, not able to lose weight. And I've never been skinny either, but I've always been able to figure it out.
Yeah.
And after having my child, I gained quite a bit of weight. And I felt this pressure to lose that weight so quickly.
Oh, we all do. What is that about? I did
Wild.
too.
And then you're breastfeeding, which is a whole other weird part. I've always had really stark like hormonal issues. I had mild PCOS, which is why I had to do IVF. And it's like, I've been very honest. On TikTok, I actually really documented my journey.
Yeah.
And I really pressed myself to lose weight easily and the right way. Like I have to lose weight and it's got to be me, only me. And then,
I did the same, Zeena.
yeah,
It's ridiculous.
and it's wild because a few months ago, I caved and I was like, you know what? I need some medical help. And these GLP-1s, like, and in my mind, I'm like, they must kill you at some point. They have to kill you.
They don't know the long-term effects.
I know, yeah. So it was like, but also, by the way, I grew up in the 90s where there were all kinds of drugs that were basically legal speed.
Oh,
There
yeah.
was also like the palpitations and hearts. There was all kinds of jokes in the 90s and early 2000s that we all tried then because we were like, we want to be skinny.
Yeah.
So I'm like, nothing could be worse than that. So I started going on compounded semaglutide in December. And what was interesting was like how quickly that first 10 pounds came off and just how much better I felt physically. And I had an annual where I was really beating myself up because I had really high cholesterol, super high triglyceride, even after an aggressively like tailored diet, which I was like, oh, it's possible.
Yeah.
I was really beating myself up. I should be able to do this. And I just actually got my blood work back this week and my triglycerides were like so much further down range and my cholesterol so much further down.
Zeena,
I
that's incredible.
CrossFit to more Pilates and yoga. Again, I had always had this vision of I've got to be hard. I've got to do it hard. And now I feel so much better physically. But the biggest thing that I realized was like, I have to recognize that my body's changed and I have to be kinder and realize there is no balance here. Like, I'm not going to be like, do this one way. Like, I needed assistance. And because of that, I feel better. Now, imagine if I had not taken that stance, I would still pretty much be in the same place. And I don't want to get pregnant again or look at even having another child until I can take the weight off because I just feel better and I'm healthier. So that's one of the things that I've really realized, that we put these arbitrary rules on ourselves.
We
And
do.
I my 40s has really been about, as I'm starting to get into them, really questioning everything I've ever believed and the validity of it, because it's not doing any damage to anybody but myself for the most part. And that kindness and having grace is so much more powerful than beating yourself up.
Oh my gosh. You know what? First of all, I love how real you are in that story of your lived experience through that, because there's so much about the drugs that can help you lose weight. I'm just learning about it myself. And my job is to stay out of judgment about how it can help people or what it does for them. Because there is this judgment and there's a stigma, right? And you just alluded to that. You should be able to do it yourself. Why can't you? And there's nothing wrong with getting help if it is something that you need. So that's one thing. But oh my gosh, before we even jumped on this pod recording, you were sharing your age. And I'm like, Zeena, I'm on like nearing 50 at the end of this year. And it signals a different transition, right? Like things shift if you have children. Things shift when you're in your 40s, mentally, physically, spiritually. And for me, as I entered the 50s, I'm huge shift in how much more gentler I am. And it's been a journey, like gentler, not in just the physical activities that I pursue, but like how gentle I am with myself. And I'm loving it. It's hard work. Trust me.
Well, a soft life. Yeah, everybody needs a soft life.
Yes. And I think that's a trending thing now too, by the way. But I think I've been so in need of that. Like for years, I've just pushed it against that. Oh no, like soft life is for wimps. Like what? That's not ambitious. That's not high achieving.
And that's funny you mentioned that, because do you think it's a byproduct of the fact that we're like Asian try hard, that we've been conditioned? I don't know if your parents immigrants, like my mom, immigrant. Yeah.
Yes.
I remember my mom when I was a kid, and I told my husband, and he's mortified because he's 6'3" white dude, looks like a football player.
Yeah.
He came from a very nice, very loving family. I'm like, my mom used to tell me like there are no mistakes, and he was like,
Wow.
how is that possible?
Wow.
But Wanda was not fucking around. She was like, there are no mistakes. And I was a kid. And I was like, because I think it's this like fear that they want to instill in you, right? To not make bad decisions. And I know her intentions were positive, right? But when I look back to that, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so careful not to be like that with my child, right? But do you think that's maybe why one of the things that's a driver for like us to like go hard at everything?
Yes. The more people I am in conversation with in this pod, the more that we're like, oh, perfectionism. That's all a part of our culture. Especially as immigrants, I think it's totally tied together and it's hard to pull that thread apart. I think for me too, it's my mom and dad didn't say there are no mistakes, but I pick up their behaviors unconsciously and they never rested. Like they worked because as immigrants, they were doing what they could, 2 to 3 jobs each. They never rested. And that left an imprint on me. I never rest. And it's hard to give myself permission to rest. So this is why I'm saying in this season, I'm actually like, okay, I'm not berating myself when I rest. And that's been such a journey.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's tough. It's very hard. I think only in the last 2 years after having a kid, I'm like, oh, I need to start resting. First of all, I'm exhausted, so you don't have to beg me to rest for sure. But yeah, no, I agree. And it's empowering too, because not while you're alive, enjoy those moments. And I think there's also a level of mortality once you get a little bit older. You see so many people that you know who have passed away young, who have passed away older. Like you're just very conscious of mortality in a completely different way.
It's true.
Well, it's a big push and pull between let's do everything before we die or let's really enjoy those moments and be able to slow down and savor those moments. I'll be out with my family and I'll be like, man, this is like everything I really wanted and dreamed of and never really had, because my parents were divorced when I was young and I never had these kind of moments to look back on. I want to do everything that I can to create those moments for my child and pass that on. So
That's
there's a lot of beauty to being able to slow down and enjoy life.
That's so beautiful. We definitely have to have another episode, like conversation, because we could clearly talk for another hour. I really want to come back to see what do you hope AC accomplishes in the next year? And also, I have a final question for you. So which is like how you define being a modern Asian female. So let's go there.
Okay. In the next year, like we're celebrating our 5th year. We're not doing a blowout ceremony, but we're definitely continuing to do what we do. And those are community events, New York and LA, our mentorship program, and then education through editorial, which is why we put a lot of effort. Our Instagram page is our main feed, like putting people on to other Asian Americans who are doing dope things like yourself. So that. And then also, I had an idea that I have been incubating on for a while, working with other Asian friendlies with this community and other people that are doing their thing in the space. But really want to work on a documentary about community and how important it is to really be dedicated to that and through line between a lot of sub communities that have really changed people's lives, not just in the Asian community, but in the Black community, the Hispanic community, and other marginalized communities that don't necessarily get the visibility. And also to remind people that we are in this together for sure. And more than ever, it's really important to leverage your allies across all different spaces for people to show up and support each other. It's extremely important that we continue to be steadfast with each other and continue to share information, champion each other's causes.
Yeah.
And the other question, I would say defining it as finding that cultural tie as a superpower. And I say that because there's so many naughty things about Asian culture, specifically Filipino culture. We do a lot of crazy shit. We talk a lot of shit. And it's meant in jest and it's just part of who we are. But I've actually started to pick apart some of the like toxic pieces of it, right? Like, there's a lot of, it's a lot of like back and forth, say shit. And I'm like, maybe we shouldn't do that as much. Maybe we should hold our tongues sometimes. Right? But that's brutal honesty is part of being Filipino.
I get it.
Yeah, it's part of being Filipino. But I would say really recognizing our place in culture as somebody who's mixed, really helping to bring that culture to others and be a good advocate for those things, I think is extremely important. And I think never thinking about it in a negative light is extremely important too. Like it is an absolute superpower to have this ethnic background, to have this knowledge of history, to have a different language as an embedded part of who we are. I used to hate speaking Tagalog. I don't even speak Tagalog like that, but you can understand. I used to hate when I was sitting in the room and everyone was like, I love the like short form content, like I'll see on Reels or on TikTok, these old white dudes married to Filipino women who are just like, they're screaming at each other. I'm like, but they were just talking. We're just having a conversation. And it's always funny when we're playing mahjong, a bunch of my friends have like white husbands and we're all Filipino or white spouses and we'll bring them in and it's just like funny. We're like, they're all just watching karaoke and I'm like, this is incredible. Like,
It
a
is.
completely different life. So really being a modern Asian woman is really honoring your culture and standing 10 toes down to make sure that you're being that person and you're letting that culture permeate through you and putting it in everything you do because your contributions based off of that are extremely important to continue our collective culture forward and people need to know.
Zeena, that is such a beautiful way to define it. That resonates with me. Honoring your culture. Thank you for helping me honor our cultures and for being in this conversation with me. You are a dynamo.
Well, thank you for having me on. I might ask for a return on my new podcast too, because it's going to be about ladies 40 plus.
Oh, I'm there. Let me be there. And it would be an honor. And I will share with everyone where to find you, where to find AC, if you don't mind. And this has been such a joy. And I can't wait to see what you bring about in the world.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you for having me on.
You're welcome.
Wow, isn't Zeena such a powerhouse? I am sure that our conversation left you inspired. I hope it left you laughing and also saying same. There were so many points and nuggets that she shared in our conversation where I found myself saying, yes, me too. So let me share with you Zeena's bio. Zeena is the co-founder of the API Creative nonprofit Asian American Collective, or AC for short, and seasoned brand and entertainment marketing executive. A former VJ and on-air personality trying to figure out happiness at 40 plus. We talked so much. We packed in a lot in our conversation. And the nuggets that stick out to me is around really stopping to take in what's going well. We started the top of our conversation talking about what's lighting her up, and it was really timely that she shared what's lighting her up is stopping to recognize what imprint the work that she is doing, as well as through the AAC, and just taking stock of what's going well, despite all the things that we know that are crazy out in the world right now. And I mean, capital C crazy. So, really, just the importance of marinating in the wins, the collective wins, the individual wins, and how that can serve as the wind underneath your sails or wings that help you keep moving forward. We also talked about, of course, the Asian American Collective, which is the nonprofit that she co-founded during or right before the pandemic, rather, and how it really is this community where people come to not only get mentored, but be a mentor as well and get development, of course, create connections that build the community. And we talked about the importance of seeing others trailblazing in ways that we hadn't or couldn't have imagined, and the importance of that in helping us see what's possible. I know in my life, I may have shared when I was really young, I remember seeing Connie Chung on the news, and that left such an imprint on me on what's possible when she probably was one of only or one of very few at that time on TV. And so it really is important to be able to see what's possible. And we also talked about mentors and peer mentoring and really the power of calling in different people in our lives to inspire us and give us different things that we didn't even know we need, but really cultivating those relationships. And so I have some reflection questions for you. One, what does grit mean to you, and how do you build it in your own life? Zeena and I touched on grit and perseverance throughout our conversation, and it had me really reflecting on grit and really needing that in tough times to help you move forward and get unstuck. So take a moment to reflect that for yourself. What does it mean to you? And how do you build it? And how can you build more of it in your life? And the second reflection question I have for you is around peer mentors. And I'm often telling my clients that I coach to, or sharing with them to lift up or open up the aperture. And so take a moment to lift up and look around you to see who can serve as a peer mentor for you. And perhaps you hadn't thought of them in that way. And what is it that you find yourself going to them for? Is it for laughter? Is it because they keep you accountable to working out? Is it because they give you mom hacks if you have children, or fur pets, or you take care of plants? So, really be intentional about taking some time to reflect on the power of peer mentors and really building that into your life. So, with that, we also touched on asking for help for multitasking women. And I see you. I know that you're a multitasking badass. I know that you probably have so many plates spinning in the air, and really the power and the necessity sometimes to ask for help. I know I've struggled with that in my life, but I am putting a foot forward, putting my courage hat on, and asking for your help in getting this podcast out to the millions of women that really could listen to this conversation and really will be inspired by it because they can see what's possible in my conversation with Zeena. subscribe to Asian Like Me. And if you aren't following, why aren't you doing that? Please click follow. And thirdly, leave a review because that really helps to get this into the ears of everyone that needs a little uplifting and to see what's possible. And now is a great time to slow down, right? We touched on the slow movement. Slow down and read two great books. I have some recommendations for you. They happen to be two books that I hold near and dear to my heart, two books that I authored. The first being Mommy Tracked: How to Take Authentic Risks and Find Success on Your Terms. That is available exclusively on Amazon, as well as The Aligned Mindset, which launched last year. The Aligned Mindset: Secrets of High Achieving Women for Navigating Work and Life. And I spoke about how to achieve an aligned mindset in February at the California Conference for Women. So, two great reads are it's also available on Audible. And if you do listen to it and read it, let me know what resonates for you. As always, I'm so grateful. Thank you for joining us in conversation, and I cannot wait to bring you the next episode.